My ex-wife Lisa tried to secretly sell the house. She told the real estate agent, "This house is entirely mine." But what she didn't know was that the mortgage was only in my name, and I had reported the unauthorized sale attempt to the bank. On the day of the sale, while Lisa was signing contracts, the FBI arrived for property fraud. My name is Michael Thompson. I'm 39 years old, and I just witnessed the most elaborate property fraud attempt in my 2-year divorce aftermath transform into the most satisfying criminal prosecution of my ex-wife's desperate revenge scheme. But what Lisa didn't understand was that trying to sell property you don't own isn't just vindictive. It's a federal crime that carries serious prison time. Standing outside our former family home 8 months after Lisa's arrest, watching the new owners move into the house I had legitimately sold after her criminal conviction, I felt the deep satisfaction of property rights triumphing over divorce manipulation. But according to Lisa's version of our divorce settlement, she had been entitled to half the marital assets, including full ownership of the family home. The house that had been the center of our legal battle was a $425,000, 3-bedroom colonial in suburban Phoenix that I had purchased in 2018, 2 years before marrying Lisa, using my savings as a software engineer and a mortgage that was exclusively in my name. To understand how Lisa had been able to convince herself that she could sell property that legally belonged to me, and how I had been able to expose her fraud while protecting my ownership rights, I need to explain the property ownership history and the divorce proceedings that had led to her criminal behavior. Had purchased the house in March 2018 using $85,000 in savings for the down payment in securing a $340,000 mortgage through First National Bank. The property deed, title insurance, and all legal documentation clearly established my sole ownership. This is going to be a great investment, I had told my girlfriend Lisa when she'd first seen the house. Property values in this area are appreciating steadily. It's beautiful, Michael. Are you planning to live here long term? Definitely. This is the kind of house where I could see myself settling down and starting a family. Lisa and I had been dating for 8 months at the time of the purchase, and while our relationship was serious, we had made no commitments about shared property ownership or financial integration. I love that you're building equity instead of throwing money away on rent, Lisa had said. It shows you're thinking about the future. The house had been my personal investment and my sole financial responsibility from the day of purchase through our subsequent marriage and eventual divorce. When Lisa and I had gotten married in June 2020, I had considered adding her name to the property deed as a wedding gift, but my financial advisor had recommended maintaining separate property ownership until we had been married longer. Premarital assets often remain separate property even after marriage, attorney Patricia Martinez had explained during our pre-marriage consultation. You can always add Lisa's name later if you decide that's appropriate. What are the advantages of keeping the house in my name only? Protection from potential debt that Lisa might incur, clearer inheritance planning, and simpler asset division if the marriage doesn't work out. I don't want to plan for divorce before we're even married. It's not planning for divorce. It's prudent financial management. You can modify ownership arrangements at any time. I had decided to maintain sole ownership of the house while ensuring that Lisa felt secure and welcomed in our shared home. Throughout our marriage, I had been solely responsible for the mortgage payments, property taxes, homeowners insurance, and all maintenance costs. Lisa had contributed to household expenses like groceries and utilities, but she had never made any financial contributions to the property itself. I appreciate that you handle all the house payments, Lisa had told me during one of our conversations about family finances. It allows me to focus on my career without worrying about mortgage stress. That's the arrangement that works best for us, I had replied. The house was my investment, and I'm comfortable managing those responsibilities. Lisa's acknowledgement that the house was my investment had been consistent throughout our marriage, and she had never expressed any expectation of ownership rights or equity participation. The marriage had begun to deteriorate in early 2022, when Lisa and I had started experiencing fundamental disagreements about financial priorities, career decisions, and family planning. "I think we want different things out of life," Lisa had said during one of our arguments. "Your priorities don't align with mine anymore." "What specific priorities are you concerned about?" "You're too focused on building wealth and not focused enough on enjoying life. I feel like I'm living in your investment portfolio rather than our family home." "The house is our home, Lisa. The fact that it's also a good investment doesn't change that." "But it's not really our home, is it?" "It's your house that I happen to live in." Lisa's resentment about the house ownership had become a recurring source of conflict, and I had begun to realize that her feelings about property ownership were connected to deeper issues about control and financial security. The divorce proceedings had begun. In March 2022, when Lisa had filed for dissolution of marriage and had immediately demanded 50% ownership of the house as part of the marital asset division. Lisa is claiming that the house became marital property when you got married. My divorce attorney, Jennifer Walsh, had explained after reviewing Lisa's petition. "But I owned it for 2 years before we got married, and she never contributed to mortgage payments." That's correct, but Arizona is a community property state. Some judges might consider the house to have become marital property through use during marriage. "What does that mean for my ownership rights?" "We'll need to prove that the house remained separate property throughout the marriage. The fact that you made all payments and maintained sole mortgage responsibility will support our case." The evidence we had compiled to support my separate property claim had been comprehensive and convincing. Bank records showed that I had made every mortgage payment from my personal account. Property tax records listed me as the sole owner, and insurance policies had always been in my name only. Lisa never contributed financially to the property, never refinanced to add her name, and acknowledged throughout the marriage that it was your investment. Attorney Walsh had summarized the divorce decree that had been finalized in September 2022, had confirmed my sole ownership of the house, and had required me to provide Lisa with a $35,000 payment in exchange for any potential community property claims she might have had. The court finds that the residential property remains the separate property of Michael Thompson. Judge Robert Chun had stated during the final hearing, "Lisa Thompson shall receive $35,000 as her share of other marital assets, and she waives all claims to the residential property." "This isn't fair," Lisa had protested. "I lived in that house for 2 years and helped make it a home." "Mrs. Thompson, you received compensation for your contributions to the marriage. The property ownership issue has been resolved." Lisa's dissatisfaction with the divorce settlement had been obvious, but the legal decision had been final and legally binding. However, what I hadn't anticipated was that Lisa's resentment about losing the house would lead her to commit serious crimes in an attempt to steal property that legally belonged to me. The unauthorized sale attempt had begun in January 2023, when Lisa had contacted Sunrise Realty and had claimed to be the sole owner of the house with authority to sell it. "I need to sell my house quickly due to financial circumstances," Lisa had told real estate agent Karen Williams. "Do you have clear title to the property?" "Yes, this house has been in my family, and I'm the sole owner with full authority to sell. I'll need to see the property deed and verify ownership before we can proceed with a listing." Lisa had provided Williams with falsified documents that claimed to establish her ownership of the property, not realizing that I had already alerted local real estate professionals about potential fraud attempts. "Mrs. Thompson, I need to verify this documentation with the county recorder's office," Williams had told Lisa. "There seem to be some discrepancies in the ownership records." "There are no discrepancies. I'm the legal owner, and I want to list this property immediately. Williams had immediately contacted me to report Lisa's attempted fraud, exactly as I had arranged with multiple real estate agencies after the divorce had been finalized. Mr. Thompson, a woman claiming to be Lisa Thompson tried to list your property using falsified ownership documents, Williams had informed me. That's my ex-wife attempting to commit property fraud. Please proceed with the listing process, but don't sign any binding agreements until I give you further instructions. The trap I had set for Lisa had been based on my understanding of her psychology and my prediction that her resentment would eventually lead her to attempt illegal actions that would result in criminal prosecution. Working with my attorney and the FBI White-Collar Crime Division, I had created a situation where Lisa's fraudulent sale attempt would be fully documented and prosecuted to the full extent of federal law. We're going to let Lisa proceed with the fraudulent sale until she commits crimes that are obvious enough to prosecute successfully. I had explained to FBI agent Sarah Martinez while preparing the evidence package, the mortgage notification I had filed with First National Bank had been designed to ensure that any unauthorized sale attempt would trigger immediate legal intervention. Mr. Thompson, we've been contacted by a real estate agent claiming to represent you in a property sale. The bank's fraud prevention department had called to inform me. That's not authorized. I'm not selling the property, and anyone claiming to represent me is committing fraud. We'll flag the account and report any further unauthorized activity to law enforcement. The sale process that Lisa had initiated had proceeded for 6 weeks, during which she had committed multiple federal crimes while believing that she was successfully stealing my property. The buyer is pre-approved for financing, and we're ready to schedule closing, Williams had told Lisa during their final preparation meeting. Excellent. I want this completed as quickly as possible. The closing is scheduled for March 15th at 2 p.m. You'll need to bring valid identification and be prepared to sign the deed transfer. Lisa had confirmed her attendance at the closing, not realizing that she was walking into a federal crime scene that had been prepared specifically to document her criminal activity, that the closing day confrontation had been swift and devastating. For Lisa, she had arrived at the title company office expecting to complete an illegal property sale, and had instead found herself facing federal agents. Lisa Thompson, you're under arrest for property fraud, identity theft, and attempted theft of real estate, Agent Martinez had announced as Lisa had been preparing to sign fraudulent documents. This is ridiculous. I'm selling my own house. Ma'am, you have no legal ownership of this property. You're attempting to sell someone else's house using false documentation. Michael is my ex-husband. We're divorced. This house should be mine. According to the divorce decree and property ownership records, you have no claim to this property. You're committing federal crimes. Lisa's arrest had been both satisfying and sad. Satisfying because her criminal behavior had finally been stopped, but sad because it had represented the complete destruction of any possibility for post-divorce civility. The federal prosecution had been swift and decisive. The evidence I had accumulated over 6 weeks had been overwhelming, and Lisa's attorney had been unable to provide any legitimate explanation for her criminal activities. Mrs. Thompson, you systematically attempted to steal property worth over $400,000, Federal Judge Patricia Williams had said during sentencing. You created false documents, used fraudulent identification, and attempted to sell property that you knew didn't belong to you. Your Honor, I believed I was entitled to the property through my marriage. The divorce decree clearly established that you had no ownership rights to this property. Your actions constitute premeditated fraud. Lisa was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $45,000 in restitution for legal fees and investigation costs. She was also prohibited from contacting me or approaching the property under a permanent restraining order. But the most satisfying aspect of Lisa's conviction hadn't been her prison sentence. It had been the realization that her attempt to steal my house had actually cost her far more than she ever could have gained. "How much did this scheme cost you?" I had asked Lisa's attorney after the sentencing. "Between legal fees, court costs, and restitution, approximately $85,000, he had replied. So Lisa spent $85,000 trying to steal a house that she never owned, and ended up in federal prison. That's an accurate summary of the situation. The business recovery had been remarkably straightforward. With Lisa's criminal activities exposed and her claims to the property legally eliminated, I had been able to sell the house through legitimate channels for $445,000. It's ironic that Lisa's attempt to steal your property actually delayed your sale and allowed you to benefit from market appreciation. My real estate agent had observed while reviewing the closing documents. 18 months after Lisa's conviction, I had used the proceeds from the house sale to purchase a larger property in a different neighborhood, while Lisa had been released from federal prison and was living in supervised housing with no assets and no prospects for homeownership. Sometimes the best revenge against property fraud is just protecting your legal rights and letting the criminal justice system handle the consequences. I had reflected while reviewing the final settlement documents. The ex-wife, who had thought she could steal my house by claiming fraudulent ownership, had learned that property law doesn't recognize emotional entitlement or post-divorce resentment. Sometimes the people who think they can manipulate legal documents discover that property ownership is more thoroughly documented and protected than they realized. And sometimes the most elaborate property theft schemes fail because they're planned by people who confuse emotional grievances with legal rights and who underestimate the federal government's commitment to prosecuting real estate fraud. Lisa Thompson had spent months planning to steal my house, never realizing that I had been documenting every aspect of her criminal behavior while preparing a legal case that would send her to federal prison.